So, welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, the 25th of November 2025, and we've got a webinar with Julien Violette and Mathilde Bouquin, getting Key Stage 4 French and Spanish students ready for the new GCSE. And although the references will be to Edexcel, they will be applicable or adaptable to AQA as well. So, um, you can see there the recordings are referenced on our webinars page, AWR London, and we'll put a link to that into the chat so that you'll be able to click on it quite easily. We've already talked about the etiquette for our events where we're professional and we're kind. But I do want to start with an appeal to you. Please, if you're not a member of AWL, please do join. If you are a member, could you just write in the chat now and say why you find it helpful to be in AWL? I'm going to go through a few of those reasons now. You can be informed, have information, and there's a lovely way of connecting and sharing with people. And we do hope also that it's something where you feel you can use it for your continuing professional development, your CPD. I've listed here the things that you get. You'll get a magazine, a really good magazine written by people who belong to AWL. There's a language learning journal. You get digital access to that. That's superb, particularly when you get to a stage where you're wanting to be able to do more research, which tends to be at the beginning of your career, and also when you start doing MA or MPQH or whatever. There's this regular e-newsletter, lots of access to the members area with extra things, including electronic issues of journals. You get discount to events, special offers for our corporate members, and discounts to the annual conference, which is a particularly valuable. Lots of networking opportunities. Now, we know that there are lots of these things which are there for free, but we really hope that you feel that it is worthwhile supporting an association which actually does things on your behalf. So tomorrow at 9:30, for example, I'm going to be having an interview with a journalist in Southwest London who wants to talk about languages. I'm going to be going to a local branch. We're going to be having a get together on Thursday for our meeting, followed by a pizza. And then on Friday, I've got a management board meeting all day in London. On Saturday, there's going to be AWL Council. So this particular week is quite packed, and it's something which I have to say I really enjoy doing. Not quite sure how I fitted in teaching before I retired, but it's something where you can really get an awful lot out of it yourself to say that you're a member and you're representing AWL. I don't always do this, but I've put the prices there because actually the thing that I'd like to stress is it's lovely if you can be an individual member. That's a really feel good thing that you're there and you're contributing that little bit of extra. But actually, as a school, if you've got up to 10 in your department, it's 135 as a small group, up to 11, £150 for a year. I think that's jolly good value for what you get. And really what you're doing is contributing to people representing you at a higher level. So I don't always go on as much as this, but I do feel it's worthwhile really pushing that to say it's worth it. So we've got coming up nationally, we've got the national conference, which is great. You get a very big discount by being a member. And then from the London point of view, obviously we've got this, which is great value. Thank you so much for doing this, Julien. And we've got a webinar coming up on the Monday, the 8th of December, about grading and tiering. And then for our own events, our face-to-face events, we make it that you might as well be a member. You save the cost of your membership by being a member. So do come along to those. So this is going to be Monday the 8th, today we're talking about practical things about encouraging for GCSE, but we'll be talking about the admin things and about tiering and that sort of thing on Monday the 8th. And then our January event's going to be fantastic. We're there. We had a great time last year at Harris Academy. So we're represented by Harris here. What a great team of people they are. They really are. And we were able to go to see their school in Bermondsey and have a really good session. And this year we're back to the BFI, which is a lovely central place for people to get to. I've got Steve Smith talking about A-level, Jennifer Wozniak's talking about GCSE. We'll have something for students as well about doing your CV. And also Hackney teachers are going to come along and talk about what they do. They've been particularly highlighted in the CAR report. So lots and lots of reasons for coming to us. I just put in the fact that we've got the London City of Languages that we've launched, and we'll be announcing, it's all top secret, but we will be announcing the winner probably, well, before the end of term. So we're really excited about that. We're doing lots of things around that. And anyone who's put in an entry, we're going to be contacting people and saying, would you like to have an event? Would you like to have something which you can tell the press about what you've been doing? Lots of ways of keeping in touch with us. And let's get to the bit that you've really come for, which is to listen to Julien and Mathilde. So there we've got the description, which has drawn you to this session, telling you what it is. And here we've got the people who are fantastic. They have done a webinar. They did a webinar for us last year, which was brilliant. And I'm sure loads of people looked at it. I know lots of schools who just went with their ideas, asked for their PowerPoints, used them. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen in schools. So that's great. So thank you so much to Mathilde. You've got her background there, and also to Julien. And it's been lovely that they've been so involved with ALL and ALL London. And Julia, you might want to say a few things to say to people. Come on, join ALL. Do you want to?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can't remember a time where I haven't been a member. And for me, I remember my mentors always encouraging me to take part. And it's when I came to the January event and the June event that I got conquered. So I've always had a membership. I know that sometimes budget can be really tight, but like you said, I think the membership for department is the best option. It's really, really affordable. It means your whole team has access to CPD, and it makes it for a great community to support you whenever you have questions in situations where we are right now in the middle of a transition of new GCSE. These people are there, and they share ideas, they listen to you, and they give you opinions. And I think that's just the best place to be in as a subject when you start something new and scary.
Thank you so much, Julien. And so now I think it could be over to you. I've got a little slide there. And I know you're going to be sharing your screen with us as well. So really looking forward to it. No rush, take your time, and I'll stop sharing now.
Sure.
And lovely to see a number of people here. If you weren't here right at the start, please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Say where you're from, and Sarah and I will be moderating. Thank
All
you.
right. Are you able to see our screen now?
Yep, we can.
Fantastic. So welcome, everyone. I'm Julien Violette. I'm the lead languages consultant for Harris Federation. And I'm joined today by my colleague Mathilde, who is my amazing deputy lead languages consultant. I'm really lucky to be working with Mathilde. She has fantastic ideas. And so today we thought we would share some of these ideas that we also germinates with our network of schools. We've got 31 secondary schools across London, so a lot of collaboration. And we're going to focus today on getting all our Key Stage 4 students ready for the new GCSE. We are, as a trust, doing Edexcel, but we know that a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are directly applicable to AQA. Most of our examples are going to be in Spanish and in French, but I'm sure it would be adaptable as well to German. So we'd like to kick off with a starter task. We'd love to hear in the chat your answers to the question we have on the screen. First of all, let us know what example you follow. That's always really useful for us to know. And also, perhaps, where are you at this stage with your year 11 in terms of completion of the course? How much have you covered? We know that both examples have 8 modules. How far ahead are you with this, or perhaps where do you anticipate to finish the course by? In terms of your experience with mocks, please let us know in a few words, what have you done so far? Have your students done any mocks, perhaps in year 10 or in year 11? We're always interested. And what papers they've done. And perhaps really importantly is number 4. Are you aware of the free moderation service available with Edexcel? We've benefited from this in the summer. We were able to send 15% of our writing papers to Pearson Edexcel to get free moderation. All schools were able to participate and send 15% of their writing. And this is available to you again if you are with Edexcel for the speaking of the specimen paper 2 from January. So if you're not aware of that, it's really, really worth the while. There is a bit of an admin to it, but it's really, really super helpful. We got great feedback for us that we then dissected with our teachers to find out what we need to do better with writing. And we're hoping that having that for speaking will put us ahead again when it comes to preparation to this new GCSE. So I'm seeing the chat. Really interesting to see. There's quite a range of examples being done. And I think in terms of where we are with the course, I think we're more or less all in the same place, which is reassuring. Okay. So, right, let's get to the objective and desired outcomes of this session. So we aim to revisit what we all know so far about the new examination. We're going to talk about Edexcel, but you know that knowledge might be applicable to what you do with AQA. And then we're going to focus a large part of this session on developing effective teaching strategies to prepare Key Stage 4 students. And I think that's where, regardless of whether you do AQA or Edexcel, I'm pretty sure that what we share with you will be useful. Perhaps differently to the previous sessions we've done, Mathilde and I, a year ago, we're going to focus less on that preparation to examination that gets the students to the final line and talk more about practice, good teaching practice, because we still have time to prepare students, and because also we're a bit in the unknown at this stage as to what the outcome will be. So today we're going to talk about what we think are effective teaching strategies in the classroom. And the final aim is to review practical ideas on a variety of exam questions across the components. We're going to focus mainly on listening, reading, and writing today. So by the end of the session, we hope that we'll all feel that we've gained a range of effective Key Stage 4 teaching strategies to help our students make rapid improvements toward vocabulary acquisition is the first part we're going to talk about. But also we want to talk to you about grammar accuracy and grammar strategies that we are using in our trusts. Then, of course, we look into the papers, listening, reading, and also the writing. And we are going to make reference to the assessment objectives. So we put a brief reminder of what they are in here. You can see them, AO1 being the response, understanding and response to spoken language. So that's for speaking and writing. AO2 is the understanding and response to written language in speaking and writing. And AO3 is the knowledge and accuracy, the knowledge and accurate application of grammar and vocabulary. All right. So I'm going to start with the first part of our session, which is going to focus on fostering good vocabulary acquisitions routines with your students. And I'm going to look at three things. Flip learning, which is something we adopted when we changed our specs. And I'm going to talk to you about our stories with it and our successes. Then we'll mention some additional resources that you may be familiar with or not, but we find them really useful. And we'll also be talking to you about quizzing for vocabulary. So let's start with an icebreaker quiz. We would like you to use the reaction options on Zoom. Hopefully you're familiar with it, but if you hover over to make the toolbar or the control bar appear, they should be, actually I don't see mine anymore.
They're in the middle at the bottom. If you go at the bottom, it's a little heart and it says react. Mathilde knows. Look, there's Mathilde.
Perfect. So we would like you to use the thumb up if you think that the statement we're going to show you is true, or the surprise emoji if you think it's false. By the way, this is a quiz. As I said, we're testing a little bit or warming up our knowledge of the specs, but please don't be shy. There is no shame in making mistakes in there. These are brand new specs, you know, that we're just dealing with. It's really difficult to remember all the new process, especially when you've been teaching other specs. So we're just here to practice, okay? We would love your participation. Statement one, there are 1,400 words in the foundation and 1,700 words in the higher list of vocabulary in the specs. So can you please give us your reaction? I can see some. Great, really useful. And I'm going to show you a contrasting statement that might help you feel more confident about it. The contrasting statement is there are 1,200 words in the foundation and 1,700 words in higher. And now perhaps you can give us again your reaction. It's great as well. I see some reaction in the chat. So let's check which one was correct. And that was indeed the second statement. Let's move on to the next one. Some irregular conjugated forms of verbs are also listed in those vocabulary lists. Is that true? Thumbs up. Or is that false? Surprise emoji. What do we think? And the contrasting statement is all conjugated forms of verbs are listed in the vocabulary lists. So let's check which one was correct in here. And that is indeed the first one. Only some irregular conjugated form of verbs are listed in the list. So not all conjugation of verbs will be in the list. Otherwise, the list will be very, very long. Next statements, we have word outside of the vocabulary lists can be used in speaking and writing, or only words from the vocabulary list will be assessed in speaking and writing. What do we think? And I think we got that one indeed. Our students are welcome to use any vocabulary they want in speaking and writing. We know that that's been confirmed by exam board. So there is no worries in fitting with the vocabulary list. Next statement, all the words in the listening and reading are all the words in the listening and reading papers are in the vocabulary list. Is that true or is that false? And then the contrasting statement will be any word that is not in the vocabulary list will be glossed in listening and reading. And the correct answer for this is that any word that will be not from the list will be glossed. Now in listening, that will only ever be a proper noun, I think. You won't have vocabulary glossed in the listening paper, but I believe proper noun, if they're using a city and so on, will be explained within the paper. However, in reading, you will see some glossed words. Next one. The lists are the same for listening, for the listening and the reading paper, the list of vocabulary. What do we think? And the contrasting statements, the final one is the list in reading includes additional morphology items that are not in the listening list. All right, and I think we guessed that right. So in the reading, there's slightly more vocabulary because there's some morphology item changes to words and how they are spelled or produced that students need to know in reading, but are not expected to know for the listening. All right, so hopefully that was a good warm-up with regards to vocabulary. I want to continue getting your reaction. I'm going to share with you three statements. We're using the same reaction, but this time we're talking about flipped learning and how it supports vocabulary acquisition. Now, you may be familiar with flipped learning, or you might not be. Flipped learning is the idea of students going home to learn something ahead of their lesson. So you give them a homework, perhaps learning some vocabulary or practicing the topic that then you will teach in the subsequent lesson. So we want to talk to you about flipped learning, and we want to, whether you have experience of it or not, you might have opinion, we want to know how you feel about it. So three statements. My first statement is the following. Encouraging students to systematically learn key vocabulary prior to lesson can have a positive impact on students' vocabulary acquisition in lesson. If you think generally that this is true and you agree with it, thumbs up. If you don't agree, or perhaps you don't have an opinion about it, then you can put the surprise emoji. So interesting, we have a few thumbs up so far. And there's no right and wrong answer in here. So I'm just going to share those statements. I'm going to share you another one. Again, same reaction. Flipped learning, so the activity of learning at home before coming to the lesson, can have a positive impact on students' classwork and engagement. What do we think? Okay. So it's nice to see that a lot of you agrees with these statements. And my last statements to you will be the following. Setting weekly homeworks at Key Stage 4 can improve students' motivation and attainment in the subject. Now, we probably, and this time I'm not mentioning specifically flipped learning, but we've all, I'm sure, had experience of setting homework at Key Stage 4. What has been your experience? I can see a lot of thumbs up on my screen, so that's great to hear. And I'm glad that I don't have to convince you about it. But in case I had to, I have prepared some slides that hopefully is going to show you the impact of flipped learning and definitely otherwise home learning for students in languages. So we adopted, as I said earlier, this strategy. We decided to opt out of digital platforms for homework learning simply because there's too much disparity between what our students have access to at home. So Mathilde and I, 2 years ago, decided to create what we call a prep booklet, which is something that is paper and printed that all students can access to regardless of their home situation, disadvantages, and so on. And the aim of it for us was for it to be flipped learning. So it had to be extremely accessible in the sense that obviously we know students are learning something before coming to the lesson, so you haven't taught them. So they need to be able to do that homework, feel happy about it, but also it needs to be purposeful so that the teacher feels that in the classroom, they can move on to quicker to practice rather than having to teach or practice new language so long. So consider this. This is the change that we made. In 2024, 2025, a year 10 student for us who completed, so the homework booklet is about 30 to 40 minutes every week, then would have got on to complete a total of between 20 to 26 hours of homework in that year. And I'm not counting, obviously, holidays, summer, and so on. So that's really just school weeks. Just in 1 year alone, that amount of extra MFL hours if they're doing the lesson. But more interestingly for us at the stage we're in is the equivalent in weeks, first of all, so 8 to 10 weeks. If you have about, we would say 180 minutes a week for MFL. So that's about 8 to 10 weeks. But more interestingly is if they do that and carry on in year 11, that's a total of up to 18 extra weeks of teaching. So for us, and we can honestly say prior to in our previous specs, we had really a range of different strategies for homework, but we have many departments who perhaps didn't have strong policies on homework, and our previous year 11 were not completing a lot of homework. We're noticing the huge impact that having implemented this has had on our students. But I want to talk to you more about the research as well behind it, and I've put the link or the reference at the bottom of my screen. So there's not a lot of research about flipped learning, and it's mostly conducted in higher education. However, it does include some secondary experience as well. And what it shows is that flipped learning, which is the idea of learning prior to coming to the lesson, always has a positive, though moderate, effect on performance. And that includes language learning. It's been carried out throughout a different subject, but it was noticed in language learning as well. The model that was tested in this research has been the following. So students do flipped learning at home in MFL, learning vocabulary, doing some practice exercise and so on. And in class, then the teacher was able to focus on communicative approach and speaking and also production as well with students. But what's really interesting for all of us now is that Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 students, as well as higher education students, were noted to be the one who benefited the most from doing flipped learning. And that's really interesting at this stage. So if perhaps the impact on Key Stage 3 is not as noticeable, at Key Stage 4, there is value to it. Flipped learning, obviously, We need to have to complement what you're doing in the lesson. So it's really important that you create that continuity between both parts of the learning. But it is important also to note that the research showed variability in the success of these experiments, linked to demographics, first of all, what students were able to do at home. Was the flipped learning requiring digital access, which students may not have had, and so on. The quality of the teaching, of course, will have an impact on that, but also the quality of the provision. So it cannot just be any homework. It has to be carefully planned. So we want to show you a little bit what we've done with it. And these are our recommendations. First of all, we're making all our prep booklets. There is one for every module of French and Spanish. They're all free and accessible. In a moment, I'm going to share with you the QR codes, and you can go there and download them. And you might not use them in flipped learning because you've already taught year 11, but you can use them for revisions. I'm sure they're going to be really useful. The way we recommend them is get them printed. We find that printed homework is the best. We know it might be archaic for some of us when there is so much availability now online, but the reality is not all our students have access to these. And it's just not giving them a fair chance if they don't have access. And then, of course, it wasn't a success story straight away. We struggled a lot because if you don't have a routine of setting it weekly, it takes about a term to get students on board and to understand they are expected to do the homework. So don't expect week 1, week 2, week 3 to be success. We had loads of students not completing it because they simply didn't have any experience or prior practice of doing weekly homework. But once they understood that it was a requirement, it changed. And now we have schools telling us, that they have 85% completion on a weekly to this homework. You want to be able to further accelerate that accessibility. We've made it really accessible, but you want to offer students who might still struggle an opportunity to come to talk to a teacher and complete that homework with them. So after school or during a break can be really useful. For us, the message is clear. It has to be high stake. And I'm not talking about high stake, it's going to count towards your grade, but more we sell it to students as, if you do this prep seriously, if you do not copy it from someone else, you're going to come to the lesson and you're going to feel really ready. You're going to feel like you understand, and you're going to feel like French and Spanish is easy. However, on the opposite end, if you come to the lesson unprepared, if you copy your homework from someone else, you're going to find lessons difficult because your teacher is going to go to practice much quicker and you're going to struggle. Obviously, our teachers do bridge and support gaps for students, but it's really important to make students understand that prep is vital. It's not a homework. It's not a negative thing that they have to do. It's something that is going to set them for success. And if you can make them buy to that, then they will buy and continue to do it more consistently. But it's really important that you yourself as a teacher buy into it. So it means you need to check completion systematically and you need to provide corrections, because if that homework is not checked, then students are going to click and know that next time you might not check again, so they might not do the homework. So we make it a full part of our lesson, and we use it also to address misconceptions, because it's a really great tool. A lot of it has retrieval parts of it, particularly in grammar. So we're able to address misconception before teaching and revisiting concepts. And then, of course, praise and reward high level of completion, and do follow up the lack of completion with any school policies that will support you to get the students to turn up after school and do their homework. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to explore these. I've put 2 gigantic QR codes on my screen that hopefully works, but I know my colleague Mathilde is absolutely ready on hand to share these as well in the chat. They're there already. Thank you so much, Mathilde. So please go and have a look and explore these booklets. There is one in the folder that we've put, but there's, as we said, one for every module apart from module 8, because Mathilde and I have to produce these very soon. And yeah, just find out whether they'd be useful for your context, whether you'd like to use them. We've shared them previously. with other schools, and we've had only really positive feedback. So I'm going to stop there and give you just 4 minutes on your own to have a look. Also, please feel free to put any question in the chat or even to unmute and raise your hand. We're happy to answer any questions or anything that you'd like to know about these booklets. No, Florence, so in that link currently, I'm aware that it only allows you to one folder, but after the webinar, when Helen shares everything, there'll be a bigger QR code that gives you access to the whole Google Drive, where you'll have access to absolutely every single one. At the minute, there's just 1 to 7, because Mathilde and I have to plan number 8 before Christmas. It's going to be a challenge, and then it'll be available in the Google Drive as well. That's a really good point, Jerome. Yes, we set them as chunks. So when Mathilde and I wrote the new curriculum for our trust, it was really difficult to stick to a specific number. But ultimately, we agreed that there shouldn't be more than 12 chunks for foundation. And we, I think, extended it up to around, I think I cheated a few times. I think Mathilde and I had agreed 15, and sometimes I go at 17, 18 in higher because there is just so much vocabulary. And then we encourage, so we have knowledge organizers at the very front of the prep booklet. You'll notice which the chunks come from. And then all the vocabulary for every week is linked to a Quizlet that Mathilde and I have created. So we encourage students to use the QR code and then go practice the vocabulary on these Quizlets. Yes, we do. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at them, but let us know if you have any more questions. And I'm going to pass on to my colleague Mathilde. Do you want to take control to talk to you about the rest of what we do for vocabulary acquisition?
Yes, thank you. Let me take control. Hopefully you can all hear me. Yeah. Julia, can you confirm? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening,
yeah, everyone. We hear
you. Thank you for being here tonight. Let's talk about vocabulary acquisition now. Let me see if that works. So I'm controlling the screen, but I cannot yet move to the next slide. Why not? I think, Julien, I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide, if that works for you.
It worked in rehearsal, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It did.
Let me try again, Mathilde.
Take your time. It doesn't matter. You're not. It's just...
All right. I've got control,
Right,
Mathilde.
I think it works. Right. Yes, it does. Thank you, Julien. And sorry about this. Right. Looking at vocabulary acquisition, we know as well that there are some good booklets out there from CGP who have vocabulary book that includes vocabulary lists that you can see here in the middle, as well as sentence builder. We just wanted to flag this up because we know that you might find this useful for your students. They have them for French and Spanish with Edexcel. And perhaps, Julien, you will control. No, I just need to be patient. And also, Edexcel on their website have a list of key vocabulary by subject. This includes the 25 most relevant vocabulary items for different subtopics. Let me show you on the screen what the subtopics are. They are now listed on the screen. So we found this vocabulary list useful when creating revision resources for the prep booklets. So all of this in terms of helping to revise vocabulary for our students is very useful. Sorry, it's difficult. The PowerPoint is a bit slow. I'll get used to it. So let's talk about what vocabulary our students need to know and what type of knowledge of vocabulary our students need to have. So if we think about the reading paper, in that paper, our students need to be able to understand the word they read. So that's what we call the receptive knowledge of vocabulary, understanding words on their own or in context. In listening, it's going to be the same type of knowledge that our students will need, but obviously instead of reading the words, they will listen to them. So in dictation, it's also receptive knowledge. They will need to be able to hear the word and write it. So the sound spelling correspondence is important here as well. And for speaking and writing, that's when students need to produce language, okay? So they need to produce the vocabulary that they want to respond to the question asked. And finally, when they write in the writing paper or in the translation section of the writing paper, that's when students need to produce specific vocabulary. So the reason I'm going through this is because it's important to reflect on the type of vocabulary knowledge that our students need and think about how we're going to test our students on this different type of knowledge. Because I remember myself doing vocabulary tests with my students where I give them a list of words, it's written on the screen, and they have to translate them. But if I do that, I'm only testing them for the reading, if I'm giving them words in the target language, or I'm only testing them for the productive knowledge of vocabulary if I give them words in English that they have to translate. But I'm missing out some other aspect of the vocabulary knowledge that our students need. So without going into breakout rooms, because I think that would be a bit risky, could we think and could we use the chat instead to think about what makes a good vocabulary quiz? What would be the key components of an effective vocabulary assessment in your opinion? And if you can rank them from the list, the most important number 1 to the least important number 5 if you come up with 5. So just some time for us to think about this before we show you an example. That's a nice idea. Have a do it now task where you retrieve vocabulary from previous lessons or from the flip learning. Very nice. So Helen, what do you mean?
I mean, if you do a multi-choice, it's not.
Yes, okay, that's what I was thinking. Yes, if you have a multiple choice, absolutely. Yes, so you could use multiple choice to test on vocabulary that includes intelligent distractors. Definitely, that would be a good one. Yes. Matching visuals with words is another nice one. Thank you for sharing your ideas in the chat. Domino, yes, very nice. So we are going to be sharing with you an example of vocabulary tests that could be used. It's probably not as engaging physically as Domino when you move things around, but that could be something that you want to adapt. And we would like to try it out with you. So if you have a piece of paper around, and a pen. We're going to try to do this. I won't do all of them, but I will do the first two of each section. So we imagine this vocabulary test. Actually, it's a quiz. Let's not call it a test. Let's call it a quiz because we want this to be exciting to our students, or even a challenge. So we are going to start with the first section, which is listen and write. So I know we have quite a few Spanish teachers in the meeting tonight, but actually I'm going to put you in the shoes of our students, and you're going to get, you're going to have a go and try to listen and write in French. So I'm going to give you some chunks of French words. It's on the topic of holiday, and you are going to write them down in French. Okay? So let's start with numéro 1. Les prochaines vacances. So we're writing in French. Les prochaines vacances. Numéro 2. Il fait chaud. Il fait chaud. So I could read it 3 times, but I know that I'm teaching my top set year 11 tonight, and that they like the pace, so I'm only going to read it twice. And let me do one more from this section. Je suis allé. Je suis allé. Très bien. Now, moving on to the next section, you are going to listen to the French and this time write what the chunk means in English. Okay? So you listen to the French and you write in English. Numéro 5. Je ne suis pas partie en vacances. Je ne suis pas partie en vacances. Numéro 6. S'il y a du vent. S'il y a du vent. I'm going to skip 7 or 8, but you get the idea that I will keep reading some French here. And now, you are going to hear a question in French, and I would like you to answer as if it was a follow-on questions in the speaking exam, the read aloud, or the picture task. So as long as you communicate fully, you don't need to have more than 2 words, as long as it's fully communicated. Okay? So 2 words minimum. That's number 9. Numéro 9. Qu'est-ce que tu voudrais faire pendant les vacances? And if you are not a French speaker, I will say it in English after. Qu'est-ce que tu voudrais faire pendant les vacances? So, en español, ¿qué te gustaría hacer durante las vacaciones? ¿Qué te gustaría hacer durante las vacaciones? Okay? So we'll check the answers a bit later. I'm skipping 10, 11, and 12, so we have time to talk about the next slides without rushing. Once my students have reached the number 12, and because it's listening and responding, I will know once they have reached that part. I can then show them number 13 to 16, where they have to read and translate into English. And finally, number 17 to 20, they read and translate into French. And if I want to print this for my students, I will leave these 2 columns at the end. I will leave them blank, but here I'm showing you what they will be on the screen for them. So that vocabulary quiz really tests that my students can hear and write in French, so that's for the dictation. They can listen and translate, so that's the listening comprehension, the listening paper. They can listen and respond, because we thought let's as well use this opportunity to practice a little bit of speaking exam skills. Even if they don't speak, they are speaking exam skills, being able to understand a question and giving a short answer that fully communicates. And then translation, so reading and translation into English, so reading paper, and then the writing paper. Okay? So yes, we wanted to show you what it looked like, and I'm sure that maybe you can have some variation and some of your ideas to make it even better, but that's something we've really thought could prepare our students better for different skills. And we obviously want students to be engaged with these vocab quizzes. So we've thought, how can we motivate them to get a good score every time they have a quiz? And we are thinking having a quiz once a week out of 20 could be a good way to test our students. And we've had this possible idea of having a competition where students get points for all their marks. They get points, and they move around this path throughout the half term. And if we have 5 or 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks rather, they could easily get to 100. And then we will put their names around the path every time we have a vocab test. So they move along the path, and the first one to arrive will be the winner of Los Genios del Vocabulario, or Les Génies du Vocabulaire. And we could have that at a display. So that would be a display in the classroom, and the teacher will move the students after the vocab test, or rather the students will move themselves, but teachers will keep an eye on their scores. But that would be on a display in the classroom. Okay? So a summary of this first part in terms of fostering better vocabulary acquisition. So consider flip learning to increase vocabulary exposure, so students see the vocabulary before the lesson. It's also a nice way to prepare our students for all the exam skills, or almost all the exam skills, to have a multimodal vocabulary quizzes, such as the one we looked at together earlier. And think about engagement strategies to promote independent vocab learning. And you might already have some ideas and things you do already and that work. So please do share these ideas in the chat with us. Okay? I've shared the Quizlet link earlier in the chat, but I can share it again now, because you can find all the quizzes that we've created for Key Stage 4 and before Key Stage 4 as well. And feel free to use these quizzes. We're going to move on now to the part 2 that Julien is going to start on. Thank you, Julien.
All right, thank you so much, Mathilde. That was really interesting, and I enjoyed that vocab test, and I hope you did too. But now we're going to talk about really essentially grammar accuracy and the importance of grammar in this new GCSE. And so the title is Improving Message Clarity by Improving Grammar Accuracy. We're going to look at the necessity to retrieve essential grammar. I'm going to explain what I mean by essential in a moment. And then we'd like to share some of the best practice we see in our schools in terms of effective grammar teaching. And then we look at that AO3, which is all about the knowledge and accurate manipulation of the language. So the first thing I'd like to invite you to do again is use our funky QR code that will take you again to our Google Drive. It will take you to a folder where our curriculum documents are. And I would like you to open either the French or Spanish, but specifically the Key Stage 4 one, so the year 10 and year 11 curriculum document. It's a spreadsheet. You'll notice it's a very, very long spreadsheet. I'm not going to ask you to understand all of it, but feel free to go back to it at your leisure if you want. Been a huge, mammoth task for Mathilde and I to create these, even last year still. But the main thing I want you to access once you're there is the tab that says, I need to remember what it's called, Grammar Content. Yeah, that's what it's called, Grammar Content. So if you could go on that tab, you notice that Mathilde and I have summarized all the grammar concepts that students need to know in higher and foundation. And we felt it was useful to have it in one document, because when we looked at what the specs produced, it's just not all in one place really clearly and really useful. So ours looks like this. If you can't access the QR code, I'm now sharing on my screen just a screenshot of it. But literally, we've put and numbered every single grammar points that is in the grammar list for foundation and higher. It's color-coded and it's categorized into grammar categories. The annoying thing is that since then, the exam boards have decided to change them, so we have to update them. But we do find, and our teachers are telling us the same, that it's a lot easier to absorb than having to look in what the exam boards have produced for it, which is just a lot of pages, and it's just really difficult to see. You could get that on a one-pager and print it on an A3 really easily. All right? Now, if you've been able to look at this, but even if you haven't, this is the task I'd like to set. From your experience of teaching, not necessarily this new spec, perhaps also the old spec, what have always been the top grammar concepts for foundation and for higher that you think students will always need to be confident in when they're doing a GCSE in languages? Could you share those in the chat? We'd love to see these. So let us know what for you are those top grammar concepts, what I'm going to refer to later on as essential grammar. What are these for you? Thank you, Helen. I agree. Third and first person of key verbs, present tense, past tense, future. We expected those. Conditional, imperfect and subjunctive for higher, agreed. Tenses, yes, Magali, I agree with that. Verb tenses, I think we all agree. Florence is mentioning tenses as well. Sandra as well. Obviously, we know tenses are going to be a big deal in there. They're probably always going to be in our essential grammar. Great to see. Relative pronouns, that's a good one to have a look at. Time frames, yes. Adjectival agreement, of course, especially French, Spanish, but also German, to be fair. Those are always going to be there and ranking quite high in terms of essential grammar. Okay, thank you for sharing all of these. So I've shared these, they are QR code. You can see our list. You might not want to use our curriculum, but this grammar list is the same for all of you. If you do Edexcel, we don't have an AQA version, so no need for you to check in, but you could just take that tab out of this sheet and then use it for your department. It's a great reminder of it. Now, the reason why I want to talk about essential grammar is because recently Mathilde and I have done some sort of experiment with this new GCSE. And it stemmed from the fact that we felt that the grammar list, although reduced by amount compared to the previous specs, were still enormous. And we have a Key Stage 4 that lasts only 2 years. We don't start in Year 9, although obviously we teach core things in Key Stage 3. But we just felt like, wow, like how are we going to teach all of these concepts? But more importantly, it's not how am I going to teach it once, how I'm going to repeat it so that students can actually know and manipulate this. And we were overwhelmed. So we did an experiment that I want to share with you. And I'm going to show you that experiments through the 130 word to 150 word in a higher paper. So that's the writing paper. And here is the task. So have a look at the bullet points. The students have to complete a response for who they like to spend time with, the pros and cons of who they live with, what somebody did recently to help them, and how they helped someone or how they will help someone in the future. And they have to produce an answer, obviously, in the language, meeting those criteria. Underneath, you can see this is specific to Edexcel, but this is the mark scheme for that 130 to 150 word. There's 22 marks in total for it, split between AO2 that has the lion's share of it, really 17 marks just based on the response to the stimulus and the content, and then 5 marks for the language, knowledge, and accuracy. And you can see briefly those, what they need. So scoring top in AO2 in response to stimulus, you need to have covered all bullet points. You need to have consistently developed every bullet point. And your answer needs to be easily comprehensible, which means that message doesn't break down. That's for top marks in that part. For top mark of accuracy and knowledge of language, you need to have used a variety of vocabulary and grammar structures, including frequent complex structures. You need to be consistently successful with the 3 time frames. So great to see that we all agreed they were essential grammar. And obviously also consistent with accurate language in other parts like adjective we mentioned, relative pronouns, and so on. Errors should only ever be minor, which means they do not impact communication. The message is always clear. Now I'm showing you these I'm not asking you to remember it, but I want to show you the experiment we did. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is so far. But here is a response that, by the way, I produced, so it has perfect grammar, maybe not in Spanish, but at least I hope in French. Actually, no, there is one mistake in French I can still see. But it's grammatically solid. That's all I'm going to say to you. And I can, to speed your reading through it, tell you that it also covers all 4 bullet points. You have a French version and a Spanish version. So I'm going to give you 3-4 minutes to scan through it and then decide, more importantly, what mark you would give it in terms of AO2. So if you feel brave in the chat, obviously we don't know the answer. We've been writing them. We are not familiar yet with those great descriptors, but feel free to just share very safely in the chat what you would attribute this response. And then I tell you more about those responses and what the experiment was. But perhaps you have guessed. So, okay, great. It's really good to see that a lot of you would give it a top score. So my French is pretty good. I'm hoping my Spanish teachers are going to give me the same. Thank you, Luisa. Really pleased with how I performed. And now I'm going to ask you to do, oh, by the way, you can see, no, I'm not going to mention that. I'm not going to mention why words are in orange yet, but maybe you've guessed. I'm going to ask you to do quickly the same, but this time for AO3, so language, knowledge, and accuracy. What score would you give that answer? Using the great descriptor, best fit for it is how this would work. Okay, thank you. Really quick answers. Well done, Nadia. You guessed exactly the point. Actually, I'll specify something, but you definitely guess what our experiment was in there. So great. So I think we all agreed that those answers would score really high in the 150 word. Now, time for me to tell you what the experiment was. We wrote these answers with only vocabulary and grammar from the foundation lists. And I think that's really important for you to perhaps guess what or understand what we were doing. It's stemmed from that idea that Mathilde and I feel this curriculum and this content is so huge. There's so much vocabulary, so much grammar. We keep spending our time worrying about not covering the whole content, about students not having time to master. But actually what we did through that experiment is foundation alone knowledge of grammar and vocabulary can get a higher student a really top score in the 150 words. So perhaps we do not need to worry so much constantly about full coverage, about teaching all those grammar points, but rather do the bits that we deem essential well. We retrieve these, we keep repeating them. We want students to be really accurate with them and have that niche, perhaps smaller knowledge, which will work, I know, for writing and speaking, perhaps not so much in listening and reading, but hopefully I've reassured you that even if you feel you're not covering the whole content, or like us, you feel you're not doing a great job at teaching and retrieving all this grammar, it doesn't really matter. Students can get through it. So the word in orange is not necessarily that they're not in the vocab list, they're not in the foundation vocabulary list, but they could well be in the higher one, okay? So I'm really glad that you agreed with me that this answer deserved a top score. So our conclusion is, be careful of trying to cover everything. Yes, there is too much content. No, our students cannot recall everything, and they don't need to. What they also don't need to is understand and master all the grammar lists that we have in there. Higher students can achieve high scores in the hardest task in their writing with foundation knowledge only. And I'm sure that the same experiment could be done in the speaking, but we haven't conducted it yet. So what we want to say to you is pick your essentials, decide, sit down with your departments, go through our grammar list that we've shared with you and decide what are going to be the top ones in there that you want to constantly retrieve, do more often so that students get strong at it, and test those regularly and skip the one that you think are not important, like the imperfect continuous in Spanish. I might offend people who might think it's really important, but I just hate to have to do this imperfect continuous with my foundation students of Spanish. It's really not necessary, and in any context of spontaneous situation in life, they're not really going to need to use it that often. So it's more important to provide more multi-modal practice of it. I'm going to skip that for time, but our final recommendations for essential grammar are the following. Program what you want to retrieve against your curriculum and do that often, even if that doesn't mean doing retrieval for all the grammar points, as we talked about. Perhaps avoid systematic reteaching, especially if you're retrieving. Instead, test initially through think, pair, share, or turn and talk with students, or just using your questioning, and just make them first tell you what they remember. Reduce your teacher input when you've been teaching that point a lot, and instead increase the practice. Sequence the progression in that challenge. We know that some grammar points cannot be taught in one lesson, like passé composé in French. I could never teach that in one lesson. So I'm going to scale this in progression throughout my 2 years so that my students can revisit each time the perfect tense and learn something extra with it. Assess it 3 times. Obviously, AFL, best use of that will be mini whiteboard to identify misconception, but also test their grammar understanding and comprehension using, for instance, a transcript from a listening or the text from a reading to identify where verbs are and what tense we think they are and so on, and using your questioning spontaneously to test their knowledge. Also test their grammar in extended production, give them feedback and targets on what they need to improve. I'm going to skip that for now. So I'm going to summarize on what we talked about in terms of grammar. We want to reassure you that, yes, this content is huge, and at the minute we're learning with it, and there's perhaps too much, but perhaps with your new year 10 this year, start to look at reducing the amount that you expect, particularly in grammar, I would say, and instead focus on those essential. Build frequent retrieval practice, we said, and build multimodal practice. By multimodal, I haven't explained this, but it's doing grammar through different lenses. Obviously, traditional grammar exercises that we find in textbook and we're used to, but also testing grammar through listening. And I perhaps we'll do just one example of that here to show you a bit of a great example. And NSELP or now LDP are the best at multimodal grammar practice. So this is a Spanish grammar exercise on adjectival agreement. Students are hearing an audio where the adjective is pronounced on its own, and they have to write it down as if in a dictation and then decide what noun it would accurately agree with according to the sound of it. So it's making students listen to sound and use their grammar knowledge. I play the example for you.
We can't hear it, Julien.
Okay. She said cubana. Obviously, it's feminine, so it can only describe the noun la comida. Okay, so that was the example when I mean multimodal grammar practice. All right, now on to Mathilde to talk to you about part 3.
Thank you so much, Julien. I enjoyed seeing your example of writing that you've managed to do only using foundation grammar points. That was I think that's reassuring. It's really reassuring, and it can also help us when we teach mixed tier classes. It can help us a lot. So now looking at, first of all, listening and reading papers, I would like to ask you a few questions. So if we move to the next slide, please, Julien. So what do we already know about the design of the listening and reading papers? This is for Edexcel mostly. So what do you already know about these papers and the way they are designed and created? Please write your answers in the chat. That's the first question. Second question to consider is, what are the improvements from the previous specifications? In your opinion, that's subjective. And how you're planning to prepare your Year 11 students for these two papers, listening and reading. It would be nice to have some ideas of what you think in the chat, please, before we start looking at the design precisely of the papers for Edexcel. Yes, absolutely. We now have a dictation in the listening paper and a translation, which was already there in the reading paper. So how different is it if you were to compare it with the current spec? Yes, obviously, all the rubrics are in English now. So we don't have the part B of the listening paper anymore, or the part B of the reading paper. Absolutely. And if you are doing Edexcel, the 3 listens, so listening 3 times to each items is going to make a big difference. So we were using the AQA exam board before, and we are now using Edexcel. So the true, false, not mentioned was really a nightmare for our students, and that's something that we won't have to teach them anymore. They won't have authentic texts in the reading paper. And the translation in the Edexcel reading paper for foundation is at sentence level rather than paragraph level, which I think for foundation students is reassuring. And they will translate the same amount of words as before, or similar amounts of words as before, but because it's broken down into 5 sentences, I think it's more accessible. Let's now zoom in to try to remember how the listening paper has been designed. So section A is the comprehension part. So obviously we are not in the same room, so you can't answer straight away to me. So to be a bit faster, I'm going to give some of these answers. So section A is the comprehension section out of 40 marks, and section B, we've mentioned it earlier in the chat, is the dictation out of 10. Now, the exam, because it's the listening paper and we have 3 listens, so we hear the transcript 3 times, is going to be longer. And it's going to be 45 minutes at foundation and 1 hour for higher. And what's quite helpful is that it's the same timing for the reading paper, so we won't have to think twice now. Now, which grade are targeted at foundation? Can I have an answer in the chat, please? Oh, too late. So let's wait for higher. Which grade are we targeting now for the higher paper? So grade 1 to 5 for foundation, with a range of grades. So think about the whole paper. Absolutely, not 3 to 9, no. It's 4 to 9, absolutely, because students can get a grade 3, not to get a U, but the papers will have questions targeting grade 4 to 9. Okay, so you will see a bit later why it's important to be aware of this. There is now a reminder of the number of questions per section. And then we have the crossover questions. So questions 7, 8, 9, and 10. So towards the end of the foundation paper is the beginning of your higher paper, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's really useful to know this when you have mixed tiers classes. Let's have a look now on the next slide. Oh, Julien, could you just go back 1 step? I just wanted to say that all this information, thank you so much, is available on the Edexcel website. And there is a link at the bottom of the slide that you can use, so you can read a bit more about the design of the papers if you are interested. Okay, so this means that, as you can see now on these 2 tables, so question 7, 8, and 9 for foundation are the same in the higher paper. So they are targeting grade 4 and 5. We know that for sure. So now we can start to think, okay, when I when I'm going to use the Edexcel sample assessment papers, what grades are being targeted by the other questions. So we know that with Edexcel, the difficulty of the paper increases with each question. So the beginning of my foundation paper will be targeting grade 1s and 2s, and then 3s. And then the end of my higher paper will be targeting grade 6 and 7, and then 8 and 9, okay? So just knowing this can help you when you want to decide which tier a student should do. You can see in the listening or the reading papers what are the questions they are performing well on. But also, it can help you when you want to practice some exam skills. Because when we look at the next slide, there is another important information for me to share with you. And all of this is in this document I was referring to earlier. We are sharing the link in the previous 2 slides. So Edexcel are very clear on how they are designing their exam papers. And they are telling us we are going to always use the same question type in the same location. So in the foundation paper, question 1, 5, 7, and 10 will always be multiple choice. And then 2, 4, 5, always multiple responses when you have a table with a range of options and 3 to choose, etc., etc. So this is going to help us know what type of questions we should teach our students. So if I'm teaching a foundation class where students are working at quite a low level, I will look at this question 1, 2, and 3 as a priority. So you can see here highlighted in yellow the overlap questions. In green are the grade 5 questions only in the foundation paper. And then our grade 8 and 9, the students we really want to push. It's also useful to know which questions they will be in these papers and what type of question. All right. The reading paper is very similar. Oh, but I forget something important here is that we have designed PowerPoint slides that are showing you the different question types. Okay, so they are modeled on the question type from the SAMS paper. And we will make this available as well. So when you want to practice some exam skills with your students and you've used all the available questions, you can create your own. And then these slides can help you design specific question types. Okay. We've done this for listening, but also for reading. So that's the reading paper. This is very similar to the listening paper we've just looked at. As I said earlier, the exam duration are the same for listening and reading, 45 minutes in foundation, 1 hour in higher. And then you have some more details about how the papers are designed, okay? Right. If we look at the next slide, thank you so much, Julien. Again, here, it shows you how Edexcel are structuring the reading paper. And we have some slides as well to help you create your own reading questions. So now moving on to how to teach listening and reading. I think, Julien, you wanted to give some advice on this.
Yes, so I think something that we have started to see being done really, really well in some of our academies is treating listening and reading practice in class really quite differently to the way, for instance, I used to think about it and so on. And I used to have that mentality that for students to do better in listening and reading, I just need to do loads of it in class. But actually, I've come to realize that the more practice that does not lead to better attainment. And in fact, I was convinced by that when I observed a Bermondsey teacher who just had an excellent sequencing of receptive practice that since then Mathilde and I have been using in the lessons that we plan for our trust. And so you can see that the teacher is all about the less is more, which is they probably pick just one task in that textbook, but they really go into depth with it and use it so that students can really feel success with it. And they go through up to 6 stages of it. A warm up to the task, which is going to help students unpick really quickly some keywords in there that will help them feel better when they complete the task. Then going through strategies, particularly when you do Edexcel. Mathilde just showed us, because Edexcel is always going to use the same structure, it becomes even more important now that students know how to tackle each question. So talking to them about strategies for each question, then doing a practice. So this is the time where the student is going to complete the task as it would be in the exam. So you've got one on the screen here. So that's stage 3. And then the part that I really love is that idea of recycling. So this was a listening task with questions in English. And then the teacher uses, and a lot of you, I'm sure, are doing that. But I never used to do this systematically, using the transcript to then turn this activity into a reading and forcing students to go back to it, to revisit their answers, to perhaps also point to them keywords that they really needed to understand in this transcript to get the answers, and making them think about their meaning. And then asking students to do that task again as if it was a reading. So going through the answers and finding, for instance, the phrases in the text that will help them in here, for instance, and then going through the answers. So that's step 5 of it. So did you get it right, and so on. But something also that I found really revolutionary in the way she was approaching listening and reading is the next step would be trying again. So students would be asked to redo a very similar task with different questions, maybe from a different source. So you can see the text looks similar, but now she's making really effective use of the foundation textbook for the try 1 and the higher textbook for try 2, because the language is different. And this idea of try 1, try 2, or try 1, try again really helps students, first of all, use the strategies that she's showing them. So it works really well if in your schools you're doing the I do, we do, you do model, where students are first doing the first part with you, then having a go on their own, perhaps not getting it right, getting more help from you, and then a try again where they're trying completely on their own. And I think for me, just seeing that made me realize that I can just use one perhaps source of listening or reading in my lesson, but I can do it better. I can convince my students that they can be successful if they follow specific steps to practice and to get ready for it. And we know that it's really important for our students to experience success in listening and reading, because otherwise they give up in those papers. Ooh, that was not supposed to be something I wanted, but yes. Do you want to summarize for us, Mathilde?
Yes, thank you, Julien. So in summary, to help our students improve their outcomes in listening and reading, it's important for us to be familiar with the papers and their design, so we know what questions we should be practicing according to the group we teach. So that, yes, students feel prepared for the question types and know the exam strategies for each of them. Working out these strategies, modeling them again and again so that students are confident, and planning fuller comprehension sequences, so less tasks in more depth. That's what Julien just talked through about. And we really want to emphasize the importance of teaching listening and reading skills, exam skills, because these papers are going to be a lot easier than what we've been used to in the previous specification. So our students are going to need to get very, very high scores, 90% or even above, if we want them to reach the top grades in their tier. Okay?
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We're going to talk a little bit about writing, and it's still Mathilde.
Yes, it's still me. So we are looking at the overlap questions, the 80 to 90 word essay, and we are going to unpick the mark scheme with you for AO2, and then Julien will do it for AO3. But this is our interpretation, and we need to see if you agree with us. But so looking now at the first element is frequent development of ideas. So we are looking at development. So if a student is to be in that top band of the mark scheme, it's because they will have answered all 4 bullet points. And to show frequent development, they need to have 3 sentences that are extending the initial response. And we can teach our students either to say, you give your own opinion, you justify, and you add information, Or we could say you respond to the bullet point, then you give your opinion, and then you add a justification. So that could be a good formula for students to know how to extend their response. The lower band, some development of ideas, we are interpreting this as students have answered 3 or more bullet points, obviously, because that's what the first criteria says, but perhaps only 2 of the bullet points are extended as described above, okay? In the next band, it says occasional brief development of ideas, and we know that students can be in that band if they have addressed at least 2 bullet points. So we are thinking 1 bullet point might be extended as above, and obviously there will be little development in the band below. So we also need to remember that students don't need to develop all the bullet points. It doesn't need to be the same development. So if they develop a lot more one of the bullet points, that would be acceptable. And it's still our interpretation now, looking at the comprehensibility of the answer, how comprehensible the answer is, rather. So in the top end, all content communicates clearly. There might be one ambiguous or one unclear message, but when we read the answer, apart from that one ambiguous message, everything else is clear. While in the lower band, so the response is clear, but we might have 2 or 3 unclear messages. So, but each bullet point has been addressed, but we might have 2 to 4 unclear messages. This is our interpretation because Edexcel don't want to give you numbers of how many tenses, how many verbs should be included, how many mistakes there are acceptable. They don't want to give us numbers. So this is really what we are trying to unpick from the mark scheme. And finally, you can see that not all responses are clear, and at times the message cannot be understood. So if we have to read the sentence again and again and we still don't understand, we'll be in that band.
All right. We're gonna do a little task together. We've put again a student task. The original one is the Spanish one, but Mathilde kindly put that into French as well with mistakes that students are likely to do. You've got the bullet points at the top. And really what we want to engage you with is skim through the text and tell us what you think about the students addressing all bullet points. Do you think they did it or not? And then maybe tell us why, if you think yes or not, in the chat. All right, so I'm checking the chat. Obviously, I need to give you perhaps more time to read through that task, but what do you think? Has that students covered all 4 of the bullet points? Interesting. Okay. Right, and that's really helpful and healthy to see that we agree that perhaps the students has not covered everything. And that came a little bit as a surprise for us because we perhaps expected that because now the bullet points would be in English, students would have no difficulty in covering bullet points. But actually, we can tell you that we've noticed, and I'm sure you'll tell us the same about your experience, that students may still not address all bullet points, even when the bullet points are in English. And sometimes that has to do with them not taking enough time to read carefully the bullet points. For instance, number 4 in here, the part about after school this week is definitely not covered. So students need to be encouraged to read really carefully the bullet points before they answer it. Because if they're just reading a couple of words like, what will you do this week? They might not be aiming for the top marks if the examiner doesn't think it covered the bullet points. Again, we did a similar interpretation to what Mathilde shared for AO3, but I'm going to skim through this because of time and also give you, you'll have access to this, But like Mathilde said, I think it's really important that you understand this is our interpretation of it. Pearson and Edexcel do not put quantifying measures to identify errors. We find it easy in that stage of the year where we haven't yet done GCSE. We don't know how they're going to mark it. We find that the sources they give us, that our students' responses are not always really consistent. So this is our interpretation of the AO3 and the sort of things we're looking for to be in those bands. Remember that it's a best fit system, but I'm going to pass this and you'll be able to read that at your leisure. Mathilde is going to talk to you about the best fit approach to these.
Yes, thank you so much, Julien. So we need to bear in mind that it's not because all the 4 bullet points are addressed that students are automatically going to be in the top band of AO2. And we know, because we've had the chance to take part into the moderation offered by Pearson over the summer, we know that teachers we work with have often given the wrong mark for AO2 because they've looked at that first bullet point. Oh, all 4 bullet points are addressed. That's the top band. But we need to look at the development of ideas as well, and whether the message is comprehensible. So we might have a student who has addressed the 4 bullet points, give some development of ideas, and some part of the response are comprehensible. I've highlighted these descriptors on the screen. So if you can carry on, please, Julien. Next animation. So also to bear in mind that if they have addressed 4 bullet points, they are not automatically in the top band because the band below says 3 or more. So here I have 2 descriptors in the 8 to 10 band and 1 in the 5 to 7 band. So I will go for the 8 out of 13 mark because I'm tempted by the band below 8 to 9. Sorry, I'm tempted by the band below 8 to 10. But I have 2 descriptors in that band. Now let's try the next one without revealing the answer. If we look at the next one for AO2, what would you give if students are meeting these descriptors? What mark would you give them? We are trying the best fit approach here. So they've got 2 descriptors in the bottom band and 1 in the band above. If you use the chat, how many marks would you give to that child, to that student? 4, 3? So I'm tempted by the band above. So when is that case, I have 2 descriptors in one band and 1 in the band above, I can go for the 4. That said, the 3 is not wrong because here I'm thinking I don't have, it's a hypothetical answer. So I would need to see the answer to decide between 3 and 4. So we were all right. And it's the same for AO3. I think you get the idea. You are looking for variety of vocab and structures, use of time frames and accuracy. And if you fully agree with everything in the band 3 to 4, then go for 3. You are not tempted by the band above, so don't be too generous, I would say, and give a 4. And finally, again, looking at the best fit approach, if you have a descriptor in the top band and 2 in the band below, that's when you can go for 4, I would say. Again, it depends on the answer of the student. You will need to obviously read it and know, but that's a good way to train your colleagues and yourself.
Something that we are working with our students is, particularly now I'm going to talk about foundation students, and it will be applicable to AQA, is getting them to that word count of 80 to 90 words in the writing and convincing some students that they can do it. This is something we recycled, if you were with us last year, when we shared resources that were called Target 5 lessons, and helping students get to that grade 5. And we are recycling them as we speak to use with these new specs. So one of the strategies that we've been really successful with students that tend to leave the 90 words almost unanswered is the following. Focusing on giving 10 words per bullet points and skipping 3 lines in between so that they reach an answer of what they need for the 40 to 50 words or the 40 words if AQA. And that we know students are capable of doing it when they focus on that first step. And then going back to each of the bullet points now that they've lived gap and encouraging them to write anything else they think they could do to complete that bullet point. We tell them about, and some of you mentioned that in the chat, contrasting opinion, or just an extra one, an extra activity if there is no opinion needed in there. So here are examples of it. And all of a sudden, with that answer, they reach a closer word count to the top band that they need. But if word counts do matter, well, with Edexcel, we have a band between always 10 words difference, but I know there is that discrepancy as well in AQA where they allow up to 10%, I believe. But sometimes word count does matter if the student doesn't reach that far. So it's reminding them that they can gain 3 extra words by just saying who they do things with, or 2 to 3 words when they say where they did something. Perhaps adding an extra time expression will get them again 2 to 3 words. And so that 70-word essay now becomes a 95-word if they do that in every bullet point. So that's a strategy we've been using for students that are really, really not confident with the 90 words. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to skip through it. But one thing that I'm struggling in my career, and I'm going to push and push with these new specs, but I struggle to convince students, is planning. I have too many of my students who want to write straight away and therefore don't pay attention to the bullet points. And I'm going to try again with this new spec to convince students to stop for 5 minutes and plan answers before. And I don't mind if they do that plan in English. I don't mind if they do it in Spanish or in both, like you have on my screen. What I want is just them to think, because when they pause and think, they are likely to answer my bullet points better. And actually, if they do that exercise in the language, like I have now on my screen, they actually have already half of their essay done. So I would rather they take the time to do that small cross table on one of their pages, because there's plenty of pages in that booklet, and do that thinking, and then go back and start writing with the phrases they've put together. That's our summary for today. So thank you very much for joining us. What we've mentioned about here is students must respond to all bullet points, and it's not because they're in English that they're going to do so. So help them being careful and identifying keywords that the exam boards are going to want to see in the response. What you did what you will do next weekend after school. No, that doesn't make sense. What you will do next week after school is not the same as what will you do next week. It's really important. Encourage your students, really try to convince them to pause and to plan. It's really important. Not going to mention clear paths, we passed it this time, but less is better. So remember, it's better to meet the word count. There's no need to go beyond. We thank you for your time this evening, and apologies for running 5 minutes behind. We hope that you found everything really useful. I'm going to thank Mathilde for joining me today, and Helen, also Sarah for being here and hosting us this evening. We really appreciate it. We will share everything with everyone.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Julien. It was really, really good. Look, you've got lovely comments that you'll be able to read afterwards. People have loved this session. And I think, okay, we had 71 signed up. We have had a consistent number from beginning to end. Nobody left at all. Everybody was just fixed to it. So really, you are a brilliant advert, a really good advert for collaboration. I know that's the theme that Annalise Gordon and Stephen Fawkes have chosen for their language conference, the AWL language conference in March. And that's just a brilliant example. And the one thing as well, that you haven't advertised your book that you've written, Julien. I think that you should advertise that. He's very modest. He's written a great book. I think you should get it, or you're one of the writers. So, you know, both of you are very modest people, and you're doing loads to help people. So look at these comments. Bernadette's there. Thanks, very useful. Dennis, thank you. Nadia says phenomenal. Sandra, thank you so much. Fab session, lots of hearts. I personally couldn't find how to put a heart, so I've just got a very boring thumbs up all the time. So if someone give me a lesson on that. Danielle Bourdet is here. Wonderful author of wonderful books. Well done, all the best. And Sebastian is asking about getting the follow-up materials. What we do there is that, if that's all right with Julien and with Mathilde, I've got you all signed up via Ticket Tailor. So as soon as I've got the links, because that was so beautifully done as well, wasn't it? That as we were going through, so you gave us the QR code and you gave us the link. So I'll write to you all tomorrow with the links that I've got, and we can keep in touch that way. Is that right with you, Julien and Mathilde?
Absolutely. I'll give you two brand new links that gives you access to the full Google Drive, which I
Right.
think will be easier for everyone rather than several ones. But thank you so much, Ellen.
Honestly, it is so, so generous of you. So, and thank you for the comments that you made about ALL. And I've read other people making those comments as well. So, and it really is, this is what it's about, isn't it? Is sharing. And actually, we're here, people are sharing here for nothing. So, yes, you don't have to be a member of ALL, but we always say in this, we just hope that you'll like us and want to join in and feel almost a bit of a moral duty to join us. So one thing I would say, if we stop sharing the screen now, if anybody
Mhm.
doesn't mind putting their videos on, if I can do a little screen capture of anybody who see, I mean, some people might be in your pajamas. There might be reasons that you don't want to be here, but it's lovely to, oh, look, there's Bernadette, there's Anna. I saw you at the beginning, Anna. Who else? Florence, you normally join in. Great to see you there. Oh, we all go back such a long way, don't we? So I'll wait a little while just to see if anybody else is joining. Danielle, normally you look very elegant with a lovely scarf. Oh, no scarf today, but still elegant. It's very, very elegant. Is anybody else joining us? Don't be shy. And I will then do a little picture of us. I'll be saying 1, 2, 3. Anybody else? Okay. It is quite late, isn't it? I suppose, and people might be in bed watching this. So I'm going to, on my new keyboard, I've got to press Control, Shift, Function, and insert to do it. I must be able to get a better key than that. And I had a ridiculous expression as I did that. So I'm going to do it again, actually, because I'm just vain, I'm afraid. This time I'm going to smile as I do it. I'll tell you when it's going to happen. So Shift, Control, Function, Insert, and then, oh, it happened again. Sorry, I'm going to start again. Right, this time I'm going to smile. I'm going to smile as I say Insert. Control, Shift, Function. Right, it's about to happen. Smile now. Lovely. Oh, you all look